How's the Hoosier podcast? I'm your host, AJ Guyton, and I got a special guest on here with me to really just pick my brain about what the happenings of Indiana basketball right now. Rob Doster, how you doing, my brother?
I'm doing good, man. Did something happen in Indiana today? Was there news that broke?
Man, I don't know. All I know is I fell asleep watching Stanford or somebody drug somebody. I can't remember. And my phone is just going bananas. And I'm like, something. They didn't hire somebody, but I took a look and I was pleasantly surprised with what I saw.
Well, so let's talk about that. You sound like you like the hire of Mike Woodson. Why is that?
I like it because I've always been lobbying for a former player to get an opportunity. I think we have a plethora of former players out there who put in the time, who've done the work, due diligence, shown their work ethic, proven their work ethic at the NCAA and the NBA level that deserve an opportunity to sit in front of Scott and pitch their vision to him. And, from the Dane Fights to the Mike Lewises to the Calvert Cheneys to the Mike Woodsons and the Keith Smarts, it's just, and Randy Whitmans, that was kind of my top five. Like, let's go. One of these got to get this job. Or if we don't hit the home run, one of these guys have to come in and be an assistant. So when I heard Mike Woodson, I've known Mike Woodson since I played pro basketball. He was, always a kind guy. And I've had former players who I'm teammates with, Tyson Chandler, Jamal Crawford, played for him in New York, and they've always had positive things to say about him. I think it's something, that IU needs right now. Whoever was coming in, IU is going to hit a hard reset with, rebuilding that thing because it is at the bottom. Let's just not sugarcoat it. Transfers, people want to leave. If somebody wants to leave Indiana, that's crazy. That means, hey, we might be towards the bottom and we need to bring somebody in who can set that culture. So I feel like Mike Woodson, with his connections, I felt like we might need an NBA guy to lure some of those guys in, some of those five-star recruits that we might need to help get us over the top, but also understands the culture of player development and building guys. And that's what I'm excited with Coach Woody about.
Yeah, I think it's important to have someone in there that the Indiana fan base knows and will probably be a little bit more patient with. I do think that it's going to be a couple of years before you really get this thing going again. And having someone in there that they know and they love and they respect, it's part of the family, will make it a little bit easier to kind of deal with some of the growing pains, so to speak. My thing with hiring guys straight out of the NBA is that when was the last time that Mike Woodson was coaching in college? Like 1980 something?
Right, 1980 something, yeah.
Yeah, it's the biggest thing is that it's when you're a college basketball head coach, your job is so much more than just the basketball stuff. It's dealing with boosters and dealing with donors and dealing with AAU coaches and dealing with high school coaches and making sure parents are satisfied and make sure kids are in class and that their grades are up and all the stuff that doesn't have to do with the actual basketball itself. So I'm not worried about his X's and O's. I'm not worried about the basketball acumen. What do you think he needs to do to be able to make sure that he's able to run a college basketball program the way that college basketball programs need to be run in 2021?
I think he really needs to do his due diligence in understanding the state of Indiana basketball landscape, as well as the recruiting landscape, and find the right guys to come in and help him put his imprint in recruiting. I think that's the biggest thing is to getting to know that landscape around the Midwest where Indiana has historically been successful. Sure, we pull some guys from Louisiana, we pull them from Florida every now and again, but the core of those guys were not only from the state of Indiana, which people think it's got to be an all Indiana team all of a sudden, but Isaiah Thomas wasn't from Indiana. You know what I mean? There was a plethora. Daryl Thomas, all these guys that helped win championships weren't from Indiana, so he has to get his imprint on the Midwest, and that's going to be his tallest order, in my opinion. I think he can. I think with this, when you're just looking, you make common sense. You're using your common sense for a guy like Scott Dozer, who's a smart guy, took his time with it. I felt like he may have, I don't know this for sure. He got struck out maybe on a couple guys, and but he always kept, Woody in his back pocket. But I feel like he knows that there's a plan in place in order to bring a guy like this who's been out of college game for umpteen years. There has to be an understanding that there's a plan in place. And I'm not sure about the Thad Matta thing, if that's legit or not. I'm seeing it, but, with that, those guys with putting their heads together, man, they should create a monster staff, but also a staff that, that understands Indiana basketball. So that's his biggest challenge, in my opinion.
Yeah, I like the addition of Thad. On the one hand, I think Thad is just a brilliant basketball mind, and it's always good to have like the more basketball minds you have involved, the better. I also think it's a good thing for him to be able to kind of scratch the itch, so to speak, without actually having to dive head on into being a full-time basketball coach again. Because I just don't think that he wants to deal with the day-to-day grind of scouting and recruiting and going on all these trips and being away from. I think he just kind of wants to coach some basketball, have the competitive juices flow, and be able to go home and go to sleep at night and not have to worry about making 27 calls.
Right.
So I think having him involved helps, and it's also you see with Juwan Howard how he went out and hired Phil Martelli. And just to get someone on there that could be like, hey, look, you need to do this. You need to call this booster. You need to be able to make sure you call this AAU coach. You need to make sure you keep this person happy and that person happy and balance it this way. And just having another voice in your ear that has more experience, more recent experience in the college game helps. I think that's a good thing. But I also think you're right. Like he needs to knock it out of the park with his staff to make sure he gets guys that can, like you mentioned, get all the players, not just from Indiana, but from Chicago and from Milwaukee and from Illinois, just anywhere in that Midwest. You got to make Indiana be the brand that you have to go to again, I think.
Yeah. And I agree with that, man. I just think that there's the stigma that, all the great players from Indiana came from the state of Indiana and they only need to recruit Indiana. They got to get all the 5 stars from Indiana. But if you look back in history, even with Tom Crean's teams, even with Mike Davis's teams, with all these guys, all these coaches' teams, I think Mike Davis guys are from Alabama, Georgia. It's just a matter of finding that mix. And I think this is a prime time for Woody to really just hit the reset button. That's what I keep telling everybody. Everybody thinks Indiana is still Duke or Indiana is still. It just hasn't been that, when the last few years. So let's just be realistic. Let's hit the reset button. Let's keep the kids that really want to be at Indiana and not focused on, their draft stock and all this other stuff that these kids have, as issues with, staying focused on a team. And let's, try to reestablish a culture. And I think people are so afraid of him being Bobby Knight. And I think they're so mistaken. He's far from Coach Knight, although he embodies Coach Knight's principles when it comes to the culture and some parts of the game of basketball. This man has been an NBA coach, I think, since 1997. So he's seen the evolution of the way the game is being played. And if there's a guy that I would trust to create a fun style of basketball for people to watch, but also have defense and accountability and always respecting the culture and the traditions, it's this guy. Like, I don't, it's the fact that he's a former player, it doesn't matter. It's just like I want him to be a former player because as former players, we're all going to come back and we're all going to back this guy. And we're going to support him, be patient with him, and support him in his quest to reestablish the Indiana basketball culture.
Yeah, I think the culture is the key word there. And it's also reestablishing the Indiana basketball brand, right? Like this is kids that are coming up right now don't know Indiana the way that I know Indiana and that you know Indiana, right? And you need to be able to start building that back up again, whether that is getting guys that are going to end up playing in the NBA or starting to develop a program where you have 3 or 4 year guys a la Villanova or a Baylor and players that'll just hang around for a while and get better that the fans will be able to connect with. I think you need to rebuild that again. And it doesn't happen overnight.
Nope.
I think that it's the kind of thing where you can't be looking for a quick fix. You have to look for a guy that's going to put in the work, that's going to put in the foundation to be able to build this thing up, which is why I think it matters having somebody with those Indiana ties already.
Man, that's what I noticed, just starting to follow after doing the pods a lot this year. I started to really watch. I mean, over the years, I haven't really watched. But, I just started, understand that every time there was a new coaching hire, it seems like everybody wants the shiny new toy, the Lamborghini cruising down the street. It's good right now. You know what I mean? And I'm just happy that, Scott Dolson did his due diligence. And I'm sure he had some conversations with those guys who, and I'm not want to disrespect anybody, refer to them as toys, but, just the coach that's doing it right now. But, does that coach have ties to Indiana? Does he understand that this is a beast when it comes to winning and losing at this school. This is, and no one really understands that more than Scott Dolson and more than Mike Woodson, who are close to the situation. So I'm glad he went away from that direction. Just like I told him, just give those guys a shot, interview them. In the past, they weren't getting a shot. Give them a shot. Let them give you their vision, and you might be surprised with what you get. And I think, Mike Woodson is a guy that, from what I'm hearing from my guys, is he's a coach, a player's coach, man. And he really is a positive guy. He's an uplifting guy. He wants to see everybody do well. And that's what I like to hear when it comes to, from an alumni perspective. I want to be able to say, all right, we support you, win or lose, brother. We behind you, you know what I mean? And not feel like, they don't want me back there, or, all this other stuff that's been going on over the last 20 years. So I think the Hoosier Nation should do one thing is exercise that we're not good at anymore, is exercise patience. we just not good at that no more. We want Michigan headed to the Final Four. We should be doing that next year. It's like, man, we might not even have a damn team next year. Like, what? Let's be patient. Let's wait and see. Let's get this man his 3 years that every other coach usually gets, 2.5 to 3 years, to start to build their culture, man. And then we can revisit it and see what happens from there.
Yeah, I got to figure Indiana fans are still a little bit traumatized from that rebuild that took Tom Crean like 7 years to actually get it going again. Right. So I get it. But there's a lot of holes on this roster that you got to fix, and there's a lot of talent that you have to get into the program that you haven't had in the past. And the big thing for me, AJ, is, what's the Midwest known for? What's Indiana known for?
It's basketball. Yeah, shooting.
Shooters. Yeah. Like, let's get some shooters on this Indiana roster. Like, why? How come they're shooting 31% from three over and over and over? Like, give me some shooters. You got shooters in that state. I know you do. Everywhere.
Every gym
on that roster.
Every gym in high school, you find at least 2 or 3 6'4" guys on 6'5" guys on each team that can just line it up and knock it in. So, but like we talked about, even as coaches, you get brought into that. Oh, I got to get the best player. We know you got to get a 4-year player that surrounded they can surround a guy that might leave after next year, or that guy that trying to think, that Thomas Bryant, or that guys that were one and done. You got to continue to build that thing. And Indiana, I think that's why people love the idea of Brad Stevens coming, because he, to me, just watching Indiana basketball, he was the last coach that kind of built 4-year guys. And you notice that in those 2 Final Four runs, championship game runs. And, I think that's where Indiana has to be, and people hate that, Purdue. These are 4-year guys. They're going to be good for the next 3 years. And one guy might get a shot and, get full of themselves, put their name in, go to the league, but it's not going to be hard to recover from that. You know what I mean? So we got to get back to that. We got to get back in those gyms, and we got to find those shooters, and we got to develop them, and they got to knock that thing down at a clip, because you're watching this tournament game is all about that 3 ball, and extending those lead. All these teams left can stroke that ball. There's not one team left that can't shoot. So we got to really hone in. I think he will, man. I think they have enough connection. Let's not forget about the Leon Rose, the worldwide West connections that Mike's bringing with him. He's a good guy. Guys like that are attracted to good guys like that. And those guys are historically known for being around the talent, or knowing who the talent is. So let's not forget about that connection either. That's a heck of a connection up there.
Yeah, I think actually, and I know this is an Indiana podcast, and I hope that you don't ban me for saying like that what Purdue's doing is what Indiana should be doing. But you don't have to go out and get every single 5-star from the state of Indiana. You don't have to be in the mix with every 5-star out of Chicago, or every 5-star out of Detroit, or every 5-star out of Florida. Like, what you want to do, like what Villanova has done so well, is they've gone out and they found the best guys that are kind of in that like just below one and done range to like top 100 range, and found guys that fit the culture that they want, identified the people that they want in their program that are also happen to be really good basketball players that are willing to put in the work and develop themselves, that are willing to put in the work and get better year over year over year, because they know if they stay there for 3 years, they're going to the NBA and they're going to have a shot to stick around for a long, long time. It's one thing to be in one and done and get that first contract. The way that you really make money in the NBA is to be a role player for 10 years.
Right. Yeah. You
get that third contract, and even if it's just something where you're making like $3 million a year, you know how much money you can make if you're making like $3 to $5 million a year for 12 years in the NBA? Yeah. AJ, you never got to work again. your grandkids never have to work again. That's like that's life-changing wealth right there. So if you can sell people on that and sell people on the development and get the right people in your program that also happen to be good basketball players, like Purdue, that's what Purdue is doing right now. Like, look how those guys get better every single year.
Yeah,
every single season they're getting better, right? Like, look
every year they're in the mix.
Now, like, how much weight did he lose? He's great now.
Yep. Every year they're in the mix. I mean, you can't discount that. I mean, I'm not, I'm cheering for IU every time they line up against Purdue, but at the same time, it's like, hey man, what are you doing? Like, how are you, keeping that being in the mix every single year? And I think it's pretty obvious they're going out and getting in those gyms, but the player development is really, really good. I don't know who's in charge of that or what they're doing, but that's another key for Mike Woodson is to bring guys in that can actually see the talent, see the ability, and take it to the next level. Yep. Keep those guys in the gym, create plans for those guys, show them where their weaknesses are, and said, this is what we're going to work on. This is how you're going to help us. So that's another key for Coach Woody.
Yeah, and once you get to that level where the players start holding each other accountable, and the coaches don't have to worry about it, that's when you know you've hit the sweet spot where the freshmen are coming in and the seniors are saying, "No, we're not messing around. We're not going to this party tonight until you get your work in, until you get your shots up, until you spend some time in a weight room, until you make sure that you do your jumping rope or your foot quick or whatever it is, whatever you got to do to get better that the coaching staff wants you to improve on." When the upperclassmen hold the freshmen accountable, that's when you know your program's rolling. That's when you're in a good spot.
Yeah, that's what all those winning guys I've had on my podcast, that's what they've all talked about. It's about, the culture, it manifests itself. And once it does that, then the coach can just step back and say, Isaiah Thomas is going to get on Jim Thomas and Quinn Buckner is going to get on Scott May. It's not going to be Coach Knight. And I know Coach Knight and those coaches get a lot of credit for those teams, but those teams were anomalies when it comes to self-policing and doing the things necessary to win. They was all bought into that culture throughout that time period. So I think it's very possible. But the hardest thing for Coach Woody is going to be the patience. We're active on Twitter, so we see it all the time. Everybody wants a different coach and XYZ, and everybody's upset. But I think that with this reset and what needs to happen at IU. This thing needs to be planted firmly on solid ground, and I think Coach Woody knows, exactly what needs to be done. Like I said, I think Scott Dolson, they have a plan. I can't see him hiring Coach Woody and say, "Well, go ahead and do what you got to do, man. You've been here before." It's like, no, you haven't. So there had to be conversation about that, and there has to be a plan in place. And I'm confident with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think the fact that we saw them come out with Thad Matta and Mike Woodson at the same time, while there were rumors all last week about Thad Matta potentially being someone that Indiana was interested in, it seems pretty clear to me they knew what they were doing and they had a goal in mind, and this is what they wanted to get done, and they got it done. I don't know if it'll work. I think that you could tell yourself a story where it will work. I think if there's things that you can do to have it make sense. So. I hope Indiana fans get behind him, man, because I'll tell you this much, AJ. I cover the sport nationally, and college basketball is a better product when Indiana's good. It's just that's simple.
Yeah.
That's simple.
We learned that this year, Indiana, Duke, Kentucky, it's just different, at the end of the day. And that's what the people are clamoring for. They're trying to get back. Oh, we need that right now. I was like, hey, we hit a rough patch. It is what it is. And now it's an opportunity to right that ship. And let's get behind him. If it don't work with him, let's get behind the next guy. Let's see what happens. And I'm just ecstatic that those guys got an opportunity to sell their vision, and they were listened to, and luckily they picked one of our guys. So I'm excited, and I think Hoosier Nation should be excited, Rob.
So I got one last thing for you, AJ. Who do you want to see? Well, maybe I don't want to put you on the spot and make you say specific names, but what kind of how do you want to see the staff built? Like, how many former players? How many guys do you want that are kind of basketball X's and O's minds? How many guys do you want that can go out and get players? Like, how do you want to see this staff developed and built out?
What I want to see is an experienced recruiter. That's number one. To somebody that that understands the whole landscape of recruiting, what needs to be done in that area. IU guy or not, I really care. I do hope that there's an IU guy that can sit next to Coach Woody and just be that rock. You know what I mean? Be that player liaison when it comes to just reestablishing the culture and what the expectations are off the court and on the court. And in the classroom as well. So I mean, I would love to see Dane Fife switch colors. You know what I mean? I would love to see Mike Lewis switch colors. I would love to see Calvert take the drive down south, back down to Bloomington, and support Mike Woodson. Who knows? Mike Woodson's an older coach. You never know what could happen. You got guys. I think I talking to someone about this earlier. Like, this is an opportunity to reestablish an IU coaching tree that was never established. If there's ever an opportunity, that time is now. And there are a lot of guys available to do that. But it doesn't have to be all IU guys. I think having one IU guy, two IU guys is enough. But also just having someone on that bench who can relate to the players, who can relate to the alumni, who can talk to those guys and help them understand what Coach Woody wants at that level, because he's going to bring a whole different type of basketball teaching to college basketball, and then until his adjustment is made. So I like those names I mentioned. The guys, hope they're considering coming back and helping out. I hope he's considering them. I don't have any insight on that, but it just makes for an even better story when it all manifests itself.
Yeah, how about that? What if in 5 years they're back and they're winning Big Ten championships and it's nothing but an IU staff, IU family on that thing? That's what you want, right?
That's what you want. I don't think it's gonna be that bad. I don't think it'll be Duke-ish. I know Coach K took it to the extreme. Like, he don't have nobody but Duke guys, but I don't think it ever get to that point. But I think it makes it extra sweet when you have that connection, when the people are connected to the bench too. You know what I mean? I've seen it happen before. So I think that's a good thing for Coach Woody to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, I don't know if that's your phone blowing up and someone's calling you to tell you that AJ, you're getting hired on the coaching staff.
I wish, man. I wish, man. I would love an opportunity to represent in some, but I know exactly what Coach Woody needs, what he's looking for, man. So if I ever get a call, I'm definitely listening and packing my stuff. So let's get that established right now.
I can end it with this, AJ. What is the first thing that you think Mike Woodson needs to do when he gets there? Is it call Trace, get him out of the portal, get him back to school? Is it Armand, get him out of the portal? Is it get Christian back to school? Like, what's the first thing, if you're Mike Woodson, are you doing when you get on campus?
Oh, it's no brainer. It's team meeting immediately at the practice facility. We bringing everybody in. We're gauging what all the guys feel, and then when those guys are done with that team meeting, establishing what Coach Woodson wants, what he thinks he needs in XYZ, it's individual meetings. We're starting with Christian Lander. We don't know what TJD is going to do. I mean, the consensus is he's going to. I mean, they just set it up for you to throw your name in and take that leap of faith. So they have to recruit over him anyway, regardless, because they just don't know if he's going to come back or not. And I'm sure he's not going to tell them tomorrow or today. So, but I'm talking to Christian Lander first. I'm going to get Armand Franklin second, and then I'm going down from there to reestablish these guys and say, hey, I can turn you. You know what they love to hear. I can turn you into the best player in the Big Ten. I can turn you into an All-American, and you can help Indiana basketball, win next year. And I think I don't think a lot of those guys really want to leave Indiana. I think it's something they have to do. I don't know that, but I think that's something that they have to do because you don't know who's coming in. You have no idea. So that's the first thing I'm doing if I'm Woody. We have a team meeting. We're talking it out, and then we have an I'm there until 2:00 in the morning, and I'm chopping and making sure I reel these guys the core guys that we really need back in.
Yep. Yeah. You don't want to make it be an entire rebuild. It's one you want that. You need that foundation. You need some players. Look, I don't care who they are, but at some point you actually got to have 5 guys on the floor, and making sure that some of them are guys that were there last season would definitely be a good thing for Indiana.
If you can reel those guys back in, then it saves you. It's not a complete rebuild. You know what I mean? Those guys are high level Big Ten players, Armand Franklin, and I think Christian Lander can be, and TJD obviously, Race and those guys. I think those guys have a nice foundation. They just needed somebody to come in and give them a confidence in playing on the offensive end, letting them let it fly a little bit and going to recruit shooters to space it out for whoever's going to be man in the middle. So I think, it's not as bad as a rebuild if you can reel those guys back in.
I agree. That's all I got, AJ. I got no more questions. You've answered every single one of my questions about the Indiana coaching search.
I appreciate that, brother. Thank you. Welcome, and I appreciate you guys listening to the House Hoosier podcast. That's it for me and my guy, Rob Doster. Appreciate you guys. We'll see you next time.